Mr. McBride's claim is that he is going out of business because somebody has taken what belongs to him. That's a lawsuit. As it turns out, however, the people he believes have taken what don't belong to him aren't us. His theory is that various people promised AT&T at various times that they would do or refrain from doing various things. That some of the people who promised AT&T in the old days to do or refrain from doing various things broke those promises. And that out of the breaking of those promises, Linux, a computer program distributed under free terms, benefited. Mr. McBride may be right about that, or he may be wrong. We do not know what the contents of those contracts are in general terms, and we do not even know, as Mr. McBride pointed out to you when he was here, that he is the beneficiary of those contracts. He is presently in litigation trying to prove that he has what he claims to have, certain contract rights which he claims were conveyed to him by Novell. I have no opinion about whose rights those are, and I wish Mr. McBride luck in his litigation over that question. But what Mr. McBride has also claimed is that our creative works are somehow dominated by those contract disputes. Dominated in the sense that he has claimed, though so far not behaved in concert with the claim, that users of free software are liable to him or to his firm on the basis of claims that grow out of the contractual relations between AT&T, Sequent, IBM, and others over time. I have spent a fair amount of time tediously reflecting on whether each piece of the story, as Mr. McBride and his colleagues have told it, could amount to a copyright claim against third parties. I have spent that time because there were lots of third parties out there in the world who were concerned about assertions of copyright problems that Mr. McBride was making. I have confronted wraith-like examples of what were said to be derivative work, but weren't derivative work under copyright law, or asserted copyright claims that turned out to be based on code that nobody owned, ascertainably being in the public domain for a lengthy period of time, or code that Mr. McBride claimed he was entitled to prevent people from stop using long after he had deliberately given to people that very code under promises that they could use it, copy, modify it, and distribute any way they want. And bit by bit, I have found myself unable to discover a single way in which Mr. McBride's firm could claim against third parties, not those who had ever been in privity of contract with AT&T or its successors over code in the Unix operating system, anything that could force them to pay damages or stop them from using free software. This is the thing we call SCO. Not a lawsuit actually brought on the basis of promises exchanged between IBM and AT&T, but a mysterious belief that somewhere out in the world tens of thousands of people might have to stop using billions of dollars worth of software that we made it possible for them to have at marginal cost, solely because of some agreement between AT&T and somebody else to which Mr. McBride's firm is a successor in interest. I see no substance to that claim, and I am prepared, under the guidance of your searching and hostile questioning, to explain bit by bit why I think that's true. But I have published those various inquiries, and I don't want to recapitulate them here this evening. I think that that would be a poor use of our time together. At www.gnu.org/philosophy/SCO, all of it in lowercase letters, you will find the various papers that I have written and that Mr. Stallman has written on these subjects, and there I hope we will have taken up in detail all the various points. But it's hard to resist talking about the United States Supreme Court in a classroom at Harvard Law School. And so for just a moment, I do want to engage in a little court watching with you. Mr. McBride, when he was here, had much to say about a case called Eldred against Ashcroft, in which Mr. McBride discovers that the United States Supreme Court came out 7-2 against free software and in favor of capitalism. The odd thing is that on the very day when Mr. McBride was standing here discussing that subject with you, I was in Los Angeles discussing the very same thing with a fellow called Kevin McBride, Mr. McBride's brother and the actual author of the document from which Mr. McBride was speaking. Kevin McBride has the advantage in this discussion of being a lawyer, which is a little bit of help in discussing the United States Supreme Court. But it is not quite enough help. The primary trick in discussing cases, I shrink from saying that even in this room where I have taught first-year law students, the primary trick in discussing cases is to separate holding from dicta, a job with which many lugubrious Septembers and Octobers have been occupied by lawyers all over the planet and by every single one of you here. The McBrides, jointly, I feel sometimes as though I'm in a Quentin Tarantino movie of some sort with them. The McBrides have failed to distinguish adequately between dicta and holding. I do not like Eldred against Ashcroft. I think it was wrongly decided. I filed a brief in it, amicus curiae, and I assisted my friend and colleague Larry Lessig in the presentation of the main arguments, which did not regrettably succeed. Oddly enough, and I will take you through this just enough to show, oddly enough, it is the position that we were taking in Eldred against Ashcroft, which, if you stick to holding rather than dicta, would be favorable to the position now being urged by Mr. McBride. What happened in Eldred against Ashcroft, as opposed to the window dressing of it, is actually bad for the argument that Mr. McBride has been presenting, whichever Mr. McBride it is. But they have not thought this through enough.